The Rebel Capitalist Show. If you're an entrepreneur in Oregon, let's say, or maybe in Europe, or in Canada, for heaven's sakes, and you're saying to yourself, okay, do I really want to invest my life savings or risk my life savings? Do I want to take out a loan to create that widget factory, or to improve the logisticals, the logistics of the supply chain, when there's a strong probability that I lose that money, or my tax rate increases, and you've got all these unknowns, and then further government intervention and distortions in the future, more regulations, more restrictions. What's next? And again, that breeds more uncertainty. All of these talking head economists, these quote unquote experts that you see on CNBC and Bloomberg, they're trying to explain the labor shortage. And of course, they're trying to push this whole mainstream narrative. So their view is the reason there's a labor shortage is because people are too scared to go back to work because they're scared of the cerveza sickness. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. I don't know anyone that has said, I'm just scared to go back to work. And I'd like to hear what you've heard from your friends. Are any of them scared to go back to work, or are they chomping at the bit to go back to work?
Nobody's scared to go back to work.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's scared right now. They have no fear of being sick or being in contact with people. There's that, like, to me, I don't even know why it's even a concept anymore, because nobody cares. Like, it's just gone. But when I think about the labor shortage, let's just take one industry, like trucking. Okay. So during the lockdowns, truckers retired. And they're like, man, if I ain't got, I'm just going to retire early. I'm out. Yeah. At the same time, you had less training of truckers taking place. So there was no new
because of the lockdowns. Yeah.
Yeah. So the schools were shut down too. So now you have a situation in which there's a high demand for truckers. A bunch of them retired and you didn't have new ones coming in. No wonder why you have a shortage, right? I mean, is there any question of this? I mean, it's not like it's not some magical thing that's taken place. I mean, you failed to train them and a bunch of them retired. I mean, yeah, so you have a shortage now, especially in a high demand area. Yeah. This has taken place in a lot of the industry. I mean, a lot of industries out there did the exact same thing. You shut down mills, same thing. A bunch of people retired. Well, now you want to fire the mill back up, and you have a bunch of people who really don't want to work at a mill. Right? Because all the people who really wanted to work at the mill just left. And I mean, I see it every day. Like, there was, and it's also like, it has to do with, like, I don't know necessarily call it like a work ethics kind of thing, because I find that the younger generations really do want to do stuff, but like going to work real hard for 8 hours a day, like swinging hammers and stuff, is not really like something that interests them. Like, they would rather do TikTok videos, or do something like, I don't know, dance classes, or
just trade crypto.
Trade crypto, or just find a better way, like something that isn't like, killing yourself like their old man did their entire life. They see these opportunities out there to make money in all kinds of directions. I mean, there has never been an opportunity to make more money than there is right now. I mean, if you do it right, you can have it pouring in from every direction if you want to put, you want to push it. So I can see where a younger generation doesn't want to follow in the footsteps of the previous, to work 40 years of your life only to, have something that barely carries you along. That's like they don't even see that. That's like, why, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't,
where I get concerned.
I was going to say, but what that ends up leading into is that you end up having like nanny state, where, they want to be taken care of, where they want, the conveniences of life, but then no responsibilities of it, to try and, acquire and make it for yourself. They just want it to be there and ready.
And where do we get the stuff?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that's one question that I've always asked.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. It's great to make money on TikTok videos, but then who's putting food on the shelves in the grocery store?
Right. Who's growing?
Who's creating the lumber needed for the housing, for shelter? Where are we getting the energy that we need to sustain life?
That's exactly right.
You can have all the you can make $100,000 a month on TikTok, but if there are no groceries, if there's no housing, if there's no energy, all that money isn't going to do you any good. Your standard of living will be less than when you were making, $2,000 a month flipping burgers.
So exactly right. Cantillon essay on economic theory related wealth down to three things: food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. That's it, right? If you have food, if you got the conveniences, and you have pleasures of life, that's wealth. And now this false idea of wealth that is presented to these kids, they think they have it. They get this food. It's like this is everywhere. It's like this easily available conveniences, right? And you have like ride share, Lyft, and Uber Eats and stuff. Like you don't have to do anything. It just comes to you, these conveniences. And then pleasures of life. Well, that's all comes on the end of the screen. Like they're stuck to their phone. They get pleasure from this, right? So what once had like people's want to try and acquire food and to provide those conveniences and to have a pleasurable life is now like sacrificed into this fake, pseudo idea of what all this wealth really is. Yeah. And these kids think that, these younger generations, they don't understand that that's not wealth. It's just this perceiving of wealth, this like, this false.
Well, they think dollars are wealth. They think that somehow the amount of dollars they have translates to wealth. And
yeah, I guess I could see that where like, if you have like, $1 million, you're wealthy or something like that. But
yeah, they don't understand that if they had that $1 million on a deserted island, they would not be wealthy. They would be dirt poor. And so you have to, yes, I get it. If we had an environment where the amount of goods and services increased at the same level of the population, then yes, it is true that dollars, you would have more purchasing power, let's just say.
Right.
But if everyone is on in the betaverse, which is like what I call the metaverse, Zuckerberg's new thing. If everyone is just living their life in virtual reality or on TikTok, then no one's producing the stuff. Then I don't care how much money you're making in the betaverse. You're going to be poorer. Your standard of living is actually going to go down, and that's a very tough concept for people to get their head around.
It really is. And the problem with it is that that's exactly where it's leading to. I mean, yeah, right. It is definitely heading that way. And I can't imagine how it is that society is going to function in a way where there's like no producers and all consumers. Like that doesn't right. It just isn't possible.
That's a good way to say it.
I know like technology and innovation and everything is going to make like everything like easier on everybody, but you can't have a bunch of machines producing for people who aren't working. Like it's just like even that concept is eventually going to be like the machines will just kill you off. Like we end up Terminator. Right?
Terminator.
The machines are like, why are we working for you? But it is kind of heading towards that way, and I see like at some point there is going to be such a painful moment, whether it's like the housing downturn or, loss of jobs or something, but it's going to come to a point where it's going to be so painful on everybody that they are going to demand that Congress do something about it. And that's where I feel UBI is going to be like forced onto the people. Like they are going to push Congress to make it happen.
Yeah, but the Fed can't print stuff, man.
Right. They can't print. That's exactly right. This is where it really starts to break down, because a lot of people just don't understand that exact thing. What you just said is that the Federal Reserve cannot print up money and just willy-nilly hand it over. And this is where the concept of UBI really starts to break down as far as where we have the Federal Reserve and their charter and what they can do today. But they've already talked about this, and what they can do is establish these digital wallets, and then the Treasury can have like these catastrophic bonds, these 100-year bonds that have no interest rate to them. And the Federal Reserve can purchase those bonds and directly inject the money after that into the people's wallets.
Right. Well, I was talking about the Fed can't produce or can't print the goods and services. It can only print the money. But also, too, I don't even know if the Fed would need an asset to cover the liability, because what you're talking about is the Fed just printing bank reserves and that are denominated in dollars, and that's what would be in everyone's account. Therefore, that's what they could spend in the real economy. That's how they'd inject dollars and kind of get around the commercial banking system through UBI. But
Right.
if the Fed were to do that under its current system, they would need some sort of offsetting asset. Because if they create $1 trillion worth of stimmies, let's say, those are dollar-denominated liabilities on the Fed's balance sheet. Oh, well, where's the asset? Because now what they do is the government would issue a bond, a Treasury. The Fed would buy it. Then the government, the Treasury, Janet Yellen would actually spend the money into existence, into the real economy. She would send out the stimmy check. But I don't know that they even have to do that. I had a conversation with Richard Werner, and I specifically asked him, I said, can the Fed have negative equity?
Yeah.
And his answer was pretty much yes. There's really nothing that would stop them from just, even if there wasn't an asset, to continue to increase the liability side of their balance sheet.
Well, I to be honest with you, I guess I just don't know enough about the Federal Reserve's charter to know that for a fact.
The bottom line, the bottom line is you're spot on that regardless of what that system looks like, they'd have to change the Federal Reserve Act or completely ignore it.
I do have to wonder, can the Federal Reserve buy defaulting treasuries? Like say the Treasury couldn't pay their bills and like some of these treasuries started to default, can the Federal Reserve buy those?
I would say yes.
Yes. Now that is kind of putting money out there then, right? Because really you're buying more, you're putting out more than what the thing is really worth. Kind of idea. So that would be like injecting money into the system.
Yeah, they can just create whatever price.
Right. You can buy for whatever price.
They don't have to have a market price. They could just give them 100 cents on the dollar based on what they paid for it.
Exactly. And so like that kind of question does come up in my mind. It was just like, wow, what would that do as far as, would the Federal Reserve be able to get their liabilities back? That would start creating inflation and hyperinflation and stuff like that, or at least in my opinion, it could, lead to or something. But those are, those are hypotheticals that we don't really know yet. Yeah, if they would actually buy a defaulting bond, that's that's like really hard for me to like kind of wrap my head around what the kind of environment that would be like, and then how the markets would interpret that. Like, would a defaulting bond still have value knowing that the Federal Reserve is going to buy it?
I think that's really the trigger for the long end of the yield curve with treasuries, because that's the question that everyone's asking is if we do have, let's just call it 6 or 7% inflation, if the CPI, which is kind of bogus, but if it's telling us that it's 6 or 7% by their own numbers, why is the 10-year trading at 1.5%? And the bond market has forecasted secular inflation very well, and it's forecasted transitory inflation very well, depending on how you define those terms. The devil's in the details there.
It really is.
Yeah, but assuming that it's kind of offsides, if you will, I think the reason the bond market is maybe predicting more disinflation or transitory inflation is because the bond market assumes the mechanism for creating dollars is going to stay the same as it is right now, meaning that they're heavily reliant upon the commercial banking system to loan money into existence. And the only other way around that is for the government to deficit spend and for the Fed to monetize the debt. But they think that that's quote unquote transitory because the government officials or the politicians won't agree. They'll just butt heads. And, although they can pass a $1 trillion, $1.2 trillion package, they need to pass a $3, $5, $6, $7, $8 trillion package to make up for the lack of lending or the lack of dollars that are being created by the commercial banking system. But my whole point there is if we move into the system that you're talking about with a central bank digital currency and UBI, then I think the long end of the curve, the bond market, will say, okay, we were talking about inflation being transitory. Now we think we're moving into secular inflation because the way the dollars are created in the real economy has completely changed.
That's exactly right.